Well, hello and welcome to an autumnal Irish countryside. As you see behind me from the ornamental cherry tree, those beautiful oranges and yellows are about. But usually what happens is that we get these winds and storms that blow off this beautiful leaf colour, or the leaves can't even create the colour because we won't get the frosts early enough. And today's plan is to just catch up with what I didn't get to do last time. So the last time when I was tidying up before the storm Ashley came, did a bit of damage. I'll show you that. And I didn't get to finish all the jobs that I planned out. So I do want to just get more of this old foliage out of the way, plant some of the overwintering crops, and just overall just get myself a little bit more organised. The clocks have been turned, so the days are shorter now, and it's only going to get darker earlier from now until the winter solstice, which is the 21st of December. So so there's less and less daylight hours, so the chances of having good weather as well over the weekend days is obviously going to be reduced as well. So I'll take my chances where I can, and hopefully I'll be able to catch up with those jobs. But I also want to give you an update on the pergola, because we've been able to finally build a bit. You might just see it from the corner there, but it actually is bringing about a bit of a change, and I'm not going to try to dwell on it too much because it would mentally overwhelm me a bit. There's plenty already in the garden to do. But first things first, get on grips with what I started and then start new jobs. So our biggest casualty from Storm Ashley were these metal arches that I had the sweet peas on, and then the Greek gigantea climbing beans as well. And it took a gate off our field as well, but I suppose we hadn't really propped it up as strongly as we could have, so that was sort of our own fault. And in here there was already previously a little bit of damage, or like the metal part itself had corroded through, and it all actually happened really gradually because the storm happened over throughout the day. The storm warning started from 10 a.m. in the morning, so we were able to sort of observe it, but there was nothing we could do about it because it's just so laden with foliage. And yes, so it's just gradually kept pushing it further down, so it just flattened it fully now. So there's nothing to rescue or save or salvage from those arches. For next year I have to get something else instead of it. I haven't even managed to get the foliage off them or tidy it up, so that is going to be today's on today's agenda as well. But it was very bizarre to see it sort of gradually being just pushed down, and you could literally see it's gone southwest direction. It didn't collapse right from the south side. So it's diagonally pushed over sort of the celeriac and then Swede bed, or the rutabaga bed. So this was the biggest casualty here in the kitchen garden. The rest, luckily, we were able to, as I said, because it happened during the day, we were able to go about the sort of property and just keep adjusting things, moving things away that got knocked over already, and just keep an eye on the place overall. So I'd say that's why we didn't end up with more damage. We did have a power cut for maybe half of the day, but that was okay. We're sort of that has happened before, so it didn't come unexpected. And usually the biggest damaging storms for us have been actually in the month of February. So we're in November now, so there's another couple of months to go before the real big storms usually hit us. So back to more gardening. think it's time for a little bit of recap, considering I've been having quite a busy time in the garden already. So the very first thing obviously was to set up that second oval metal planter, and this one took a little bit more time and effort than the first one because the ground there was actually much more severely sloped, and I had to just get it positioned and try to get it as level as possible, and so that they all match up between those sort of palette colour beds as well. And then it was always the time to start filling it up. Now, on another morning, I actually had already started to clear one of these fruit tree guild beds, and I took out a lot of weeds from there, a lot of calendula again, a lot of just overgrown like lettuces, chard, things that had gone into flower. So just getting that side of the bed really tidy. Now, I also actually dug out a lot of the yarrow that I had been previously been nurturing and hoping that it would spread. The actual runners flowers were not as nice as the original flowers, so they're a bit of a hit and miss. So I took out the ones that I knew that were more of a sort of off-whitish in colour rather than the nice pinks that I usually get from that variety. And yeah, I just took it well back. It actually had spread out a little bit too far than I would have wanted, but got that bed, yeah, just overall get all the foliage out, and all of that foliage except for yarrow I'm not going to be using as a filler in those beds. So all the calendula, everything, and I tried to sort of even chop it down a little bit because I knew there was so much more foliage still to come from the garden. I took down a sweet pea as well from the slatted wall here. That was the one that sort of went over way quicker. Now in that case, I actually didn't cut it all the way down the ground. I sort of left a couple of inch stubs above the soil level just in case it will actually start to regrow. There isn't anything stopping it from regrowing from the roots that are still in the soil. But yeah, I didn't cut them flush with the soil surface. I left them a little bit of a sort of a stub just in case it will start again. Then obviously all the foliage from the arches, those that had been clipped. So that was again mostly sweet peas and a bit of the Greek gigantea foliage mixed in. I tried to take out as many of the seed pods of the sweet peas, and definitely I collected all of the Greek gigantea pods. But luckily I already, while they were in their situ, even during the storm, I had been collecting the seed pods off them and labeling them, just trying to sort of keep them separate as much as possible, because obviously anything I was collecting now, they were going to be total mix. I wouldn't have known from which side of the planter the foliage was coming from. And I was actually happy to see that there were a good few pods of those Greek gigantea there as well. And I tried to dry them out and make sure that I have that seed then kept for next year. I was also able to tidy up the beetroot bed. There was again a lot of spent foliage in there, and the wild rocket actually had spread a bit too much, so I took quite a bit of that out. But the same with the spent foliage of calendula, borage, any of the beetroots that actually had gone to seed, I just took them all out. And obviously I did have the helpers around me, but gosh, they made quite a mess from that area now with their digging around the place, moving the wood chip that would have otherwise been only around the footpaths onto the beds and getting the soil then out of the beds. So I've decided to put up a bit of scaffolding netting as a fence, so that they couldn't just come right off the field into it. But the two black ones have already discovered that if they just keep going along the fence line, there is a little gap that I left obviously for my own ease of use, and they can still get through it. The other hens now actually just keep walking, and they've been hopping into the squared timber planters in the middle and helping themselves to Brussels sprouts, which would be fine because there's nothing from those plants really anyway. But there's also kale next to those Brussels sprouts, so they will nibble anything what's around their sort of view. So I'm not quite as pleased as that. So I've put up a second scaffolding netting at the moment, just so that just to keep them away from here until I figure out how to do it, because I do want them around the garden. They're great for getting rid of, especially the flea beetle. There's so much flea beetle in the garden, and I'm not doing anything to actually stop the flea beetle. It's just multiplying so easily itself anyway. It's just a pointless exercise, I think. And you see how much foliage is actually coming out of the garden. And mind you, this is only the kitchen garden side of it. Nothing from the ornamentals yet. And even from the kitchen garden, this is not all of it. And if I wouldn't have these large planters to place the foliage into, yeah, I definitely would need a much bigger composting system, or obviously just put a heap on in the corner of the field. And another way to make it more compact, I absolutely could have just put them all through the chipper or the big shredder. But as they are, I think they'll do fine. Actually, out of the very first planter, I could already feel the heat radiating out of it as I was adding more foliage to there as well, because obviously the first one filled up very, very quickly. And as the grass around the hen's coop needed to be cut as well, and obviously the big field maples are actually dropping their leaves on their grass, it was great to be able to pick that up and just add that as a top up to the planters as well. So I think now what I'll continue doing is sort out the in-ground beds, or get the perimeters of those beds back, and let's see if I can actually get a bit of planting done. And I nearly forgot, I actually emptied out the greenhouse as well, got all that spent foliage out of there, got the tomatoes down, and again, the fresh tomatoes, those cherry tomatoes, sweet melon, they are so delicious. I'd say me and the girls shared a good few of them while I was actually cleaning up the place. And I was happy I was able to gather a lot of calendula seeds, so this would be handy, just rather than allowing the ones that just are volunteers and pop up anywhere. I could, without guilt now, pull them up, knowing that I have plenty of seed that I could sow in areas that I actually want to promote the calendula growing, because they do spread very, very fast. Now, there has been a massive change with the pergola since I last talked about it or even shown it. And the main thing goes back to where one of the structural timbers basically ended up rotting away, and that had affected other parts of the timber as well. So we thought, that's fine, we're just going to replace those couple of rotten pieces of wood. And we had to order new timbers. There was a little bit of time frame involved in it. I took down every bit of the big calamities that was actually sort of covering the pergola initially. And then we discovered that that rot had actually travelled further down in these big structural posts that have been in here from the get-go. So they are down about 10, I'd want to say 10 years. Yeah, they're there for the last 10 years, and they were the very first things to actually go down before the decking was ever built, before the planter was built. So we really did not have any way to access that post or replace it that easily. So we put every bit of that build on hold until we could figure out what we could salvage, if it was salvageable at all. Then life just overall got really busy itself. And the main thing was that we just could not physically replace the vertical or the upright posts if we're going to have to take them down altogether. So we even contemplating not having any pergola. But then, considering that we still like this big spacious decking area, the pergola is just another feature that really adds to this space. So we did decide then that we're not going to continue having a plant material covering the roof structure part, because that's potentially going to create the same issue. But we are going to be covering it, creating a more of a dry atmosphere underneath the decking area as well. And it would be just a handy place then to have the seating, considering it's constantly raining here. But as we didn't want to lose out on any of the light that's actually coming in at the moment, we have decided to go with a polycarb roof material. Now, that hasn't arrived yet, so the polycarb roofing has not been attached to the structure yet, but the rest of the structure is there. There's just a couple of more battens to actually be placed there where the polycarb is going to be attached to. But overall, we are actually really happy about it, because this is a DIY. We're not carpenters. My husband isn't a carpenter, so it's just trying to figure out the angles, what would suit, what size would suit, and how to make it structurally as strong as possible, and trying to reduce down the vertical post to a point where the interior of the post wasn't as damaged or rotten. Used an awful lot of fungicide inside of it, hoping to stop it. But that also leaves a question, what's going to happen with that big clematis Montana grandiflora, because that's a really big vigorous climber, and we've always loved those dainty white flowers that would have a scent of a honey. The bees love it, pollinators love that particular plant as well. And having it just on the back on the trellis wall is not going to be enough. It wants to grow bigger. So I have not thought where to place that yet, because I don't want to take the trellis down. The trellis went up there because there was just too much of a wind tunnel. So I know the reason why that went up there, but I can't let the clematis climb that high anymore. I could use less vigorous clematis varieties on it. I could use a climbing rose on it, but I do want to find a new home for that Montana clematis. And I suppose what we're hoping for is that once those posts are going to be covered with a sort of solid roof, so that they will stay dry, at least from that part where the rot had gotten in. And it was actually overall because of another rotten timber, so it had travelled there. This wasn't where the rot had originated from. And then the fungicide itself is going to do a job, just that, hoping that what we've done to it will get us through another 10 years. That's really all we're hoping for. But at least that's a really positive progress on the pergola. We have a decision made. We know how to take that further. So just one more element missing, which is the actual sheeting, and hopefully that won't be too far off. I've actually ordered it from that same company that we got the polycarb greenhouse from, because they actually sell those sheets on their own as well. So I've ordered the same thickness, 6 mil, and I think the sheet size was 2.1 meters by 6 meters. So it's a good big slab of it. Now we won't need the 6 meters. The pergola length is just about 4.5 meters. So we're going to have to cut that a little bit shorter. But overall, yeah, that way we're able to still get the light through the roof and create a sort of a more of a dry environment underneath of it then. So any new further developments, obviously, I'm sure I'll let you know again about that. So the in-ground beds now here in the kitchen garden have been tidied up as much as I could. I was able to sort of rake back the wood chip just to put them back around the footpaths where it used to be. I found the areas where the real soil is actually underneath of it, and get my lines straight again. Now I couldn't find the real rake, so I had to use like a leaf rake for it, but it actually did the job absolutely fine. I topped up 3 of the beds with fresh compost as well. There were just a couple of old bags I had in the yard. Now they were exposed to rainwater, so those bags were absolutely soaked through and through. A lesson learned. It was very hard to actually move them, so I even had to bring out the wheelbarrow. And I've just spread them out. So all I'm going to do now is to those beds, and anywhere I'm going to be planting today, I'm just going to add my chicken manure pellets or fish blood and bone. I'll see what's left in the shed, and then seaweed granules as well. So those 2 skinny beds that are right in front of me at the moment are the beds where I would have had the spring cabbages in and turnips and radishes growing. But they are also the beds where I had quite a substantial cabbage root fly infestation inside the soil. So throughout the season, I actually ended up not planting anything else into it. I did not replace any plantings because the rest of the plants had already gone into ground as well. So there was a spot for them already. And what ended up growing was just a few spinaches, I think, and then obviously now the borage is still there. I'm leaving that because it still keeps putting out fresh flowers, and the bees, and especially the bumblebees, they just keep going back onto the flowers. Borage is a great plant that way because it just keeps replenishing its it's nectar in the flowers. And all I'm going to do now for those beds that I have prepped, so those 3 beds where I'm going to do the planting in, I'm going to just amend the soil a little bit as well, even though I added fresh compost to them, is I'm going to add either chicken manure pellets or fish blood and bone. I'm not sure what I've left now in the shed, and I'm going to add a bit of seaweed granules as well. And also I do want to consider crop rotation. It's just something my mind is happy with. It's not strictly necessary, but for some reason it just works for my mind. So if I had brassica plants in those beds, legume family plants will follow those. And wherever I had legumes, which was the bean and pea frames that were here right next to me, onions and roots are going to follow that group. And then brassicas will end up going where the onions and roots are. So there's like a constant circulation. And I don't add potatoes at the moment in the soil, in ground beds, and I don't have tomatoes. So I don't have to worry about that group of plants. So I'm only dealing with brassicas, legumes and onions and roots. And I usually group the onions and roots together. I don't split them up. So I'm sort of trying to keep it as easy as possible for myself. So what I'm thinking of sowing into these beds where I had the brassicas in is broad beans. And this is a red epicure variety. Never grown over winter broad beans, and these are okay for spring and autumn sowing. So from February to May or October to November, and we're just early in November now. And I just like the look of them. Just the way they say the chestnut coloured bean, so it's actually darker coloured bean that's inside of it. And because they're legumes, I'll put them into this brassica. And for the bed where I had the peas and beans in, I'll have that following with onions. And again, I've never done overwinter onions. I've tried growing onions so, well, the bulbous onions. I've grown shallots a lot, but I'm going to give this a go because I do want, if there's any chance at all, just have plants inside the ground. Girls, you please don't even think about coming in here. So I have 2 different types of onion sets for that. One is Ocado, which is like a red one. And then I have the Sensu yellow as well. They're quite healthy looking sets inside a bag, and there's some green shoots popping out of them already as well. Then with the beetroot bed, I haven't fully cleared out the bed because some of the beetroots, they can still actually grow a bit bigger, so I haven't taken them all out. And there's some spring onions in between them as well. But I also have a tray of these purple sprouting broccoli seedlings that are so desperate to get out. They are quite pot bound, as you see there. They've been, I think I got them in end of August or month of August. So I'm thinking of planting them in between the beetroot plants as they are still in the ground, and because they're so small. So I'm not going to be disturbing anything within those 2 groups of plants. And then when the beetroot is ready to come out, they can keep growing. And I obviously have that mesh or the netting as well now for a bit of windbreak for them. So I'm sure that's going to help them along. And if I get nothing else done today, I feel I've actually accomplished a lot with these. So I'll get them planted up. Very interested now to see how these would turn out. And then I also actually have just a couple of packets. I have Phacelia here, and I have a clover, red clover, as green manure. And these are seeds I should have used last year. The best or sow-by dates are over, or like Phacelia actually is finishing this year. So I'm so sick of having these packets around the house where I haven't used them for whatever reason. I haven't had time and opportunity. I'm going to use them. If they come to nothing, because it's too late to sow them, they come to nothing, but I'm not hoarding them, because I'm trying to reduce the amount of seed packets I have that I just haven't used, because it's just otherwise a waste of money really. But yeah, if we could just get more of this kind of nice dry autumnal weather, and I'd be able to catch up so quickly with these kind of jobs. It's been really, really pleasant to be in the garden, but I have so much more work to do in the ornamental side and the greenhouse. Yeah, the seeds I sowed the last time for the lettuces, yeah, very questionable, terrible germination. And yeah, I still have to plant up the greenhouse as well. So there's so much still to do. You always think you're on top of it, but then you remember, oh yeah, actually, it's this to do and that to do. So. But overall, otherwise, I feel it's been a really productive couple of days, and there's still so much more to be done in the garden, but a big chunk of it now has been accomplished. And the beds, those two new raised beds, are so full to the brim. And I'll try to keep an eye on it now, how they're reducing down, and even see if it's possible maybe to use a thermal camera on it that my husband is using for work, just to see how it's heating up maybe inside, even though I was quite sure they won't heat up at all. But just the way I could feel the radiation of heat coming from the first planter when I was adding new material to it. But otherwise, that's it for this time, and thanks a million for watching, and hopefully you liked it. Thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.